Update. My 35 male mother's 58 female new fiance 24 male wants me to call him Dad. How do I navigate this? Original post. Please buckle in because this is also weird. I'm a 35-year-old man, and for some backstory, my dad died when I was 19, leaving my mom with me and my two siblings. I'm the oldest. It took some time, but eventually my mom started dating again. We don't live together per se, but our houses back onto each other and have a gate. So it's pretty common for her to offer to do my laundry, for me to go over for dinner or to look after our dog, stuff like that. My siblings and I also go over there for dinner every other Friday night or so. A bit after she started dating, the men she was dating started getting younger and younger. I've never had a problem with this. She's been very open with me and my siblings that she wants to get married again, and we've always been supportive, at least after the initial shocks, lol. The latest guy is by far the most serious, and they've been dating since around last June. He proposed at the start of autumn and they wanted to get married next summer. Again, my siblings and I are fine with this because it's her life, and we trust him. He's a nice guy and they clearly love each other. Anyway, this weekend her fiancé, let's call him Phil, called me and asked if I could come over. I said, yeah, sure, I'll be over after work, assuming he needed help with some DIY stuff they're doing. When I got there, he called me Sport and said we needed to talk. I should mention that Phil does this thing where he calls me and my younger brother things like kid, sport, scout, little buddy, or my personal favorite, red and blue, seemingly out of nowhere. My brother is 30 by the way. He tried it with my little sister 28 once and called her princess, but she just stared at him, and he stopped. The thing with Phil is that he reminds me a lot of Charlie Day's character in Horrible Bosses, and that his whole ambition has always been to meet a girl, get married, and have a family. When he told me and my brother this, my brother joked that our mom might come short on the last part. Phil got very upset, but they made up after. Anyway, I asked if my mom was around, and he said no. It was just him, and that we really need to talk man to man. I said sure, and he started talking about how he's always wanted to be a father and raise a son to call his own. Then he dropped this bombshell. Now, I know I can never replace your father, the man who made you, but it would mean the world to me if you could call me Dad. I'll admit it, I sniggered a little. Then I realized he was serious because he looked like he was about to cry. He didn't drop it either. I asked if he really meant it, and he got emotional, talking about what it means to be a man and how his purpose is to have and provide for a family. He said he wants me and my siblings to be part of that family. He reiterated that he'll never replace my father, which rubbed me the wrong way, but he's ready to step up and be my dad and provide for and protect me and my siblings. I was just sitting there thinking, dude, I'm a decade older than you and live in a separate house. I don't need providing for. Even if I did, I don't think a guy a third my age who works part-time at the hardware store and collects manga is the man to do it. No offense to anyone into that. It's just, I don't know. I was a bit taken aback. I was in shock, so I just said, okay. He got emotional again, this time in a happy way, talking about how he wants to go camping or to a baseball game. I don't even like baseball, lol. He said he joined the Lions this year and wants to bring me into it as his boy. This all feels so surreal, especially because I'm 10 years older than this guy. I ended it by saying, this has gotten a bit too weird, and went home. He got very upset. I called my brother and he agreed it sounded weird AF. Later, my mom called me. She wasn't disappointed but admitted it had made Phil very upset and depressed. I told her that if he's embarrassed, he doesn't need to be. I get that he's excited about the marriage and we can laugh this off as a funny story. She said that wasn't what he was upset about. He, and she a little, is upset that he poured his heart out and I rejected him. She admitted it's a bit kooky but said this is how he proves to himself he's a man. I got a bit angry and said something like, first off, it's not my job to certify what's between his legs. This doesn't prove he's a man. It just proves he's a nut job. I apologized immediately, but she said she didn't want to hear it and hung up. She called me back 10 minutes later and we apologized. She begged me to just go along with it until he has some kids to call his own. She let slip that they plan to try IVF because she's not ready to give up on being a mom just yet. While I have my own thoughts about whether or not that's a good idea, I'm not here to litigate that. We finished the call fine. I reiterated that I'd support her, and she agreed it was definitely a stressful situation for me, but begged me to at least think about it. Which leads me to here. I've thought it over, and obviously I'm going to say no. I had a dad, and he died. Rest in peace, Dad. That's the only dad I've ever needed, wanted, or will ever bestow that title on. I'm not asking if someone is being unreasonable or what I should do. I'm more asking what I should say. This clearly means a lot to Phil for some reason, and I deeply love my mom, so I want to minimize the damage, especially since we're still so involved in each other's lives and they live right behind me. How can I make it clear to them, as painlessly as possible, that I think this is weird and borderline offensive? I really don't want to rip the band-aid off because I fear what it might do to the family. Edit showed my brother the post and he laughed so hard he started coughing. Lol. Then he said we should call Phil Dr. Phil and each other Blue and Red, swapping the nicknames he gave us around. Thoughts? Edit 2. As people were asking, he has no access to my mom's money or anything like that. She rents the house, which came pre-furnished and otherwise has no real assets. She doesn't make a lot of money anyway, so there's no pecuniary motive we can think of. Now for the top advice before reading the updates. I wonder if he grew up without a dad. He's giving a weird 1950s energy to this whole thing that feels like he only knows about dads from seeing them on TV. Oh no, his dad's still alive. Both his parents are. I've met them. They definitely feel odd about the whole situation, but go along with it for his sake. If it is so important to his personal identity to find a girl, have kids with her, and raise them as their dad, it seems like marrying a 58-year-old woman with adult children significantly older than himself is a pretty ineffective way to achieve those life goals. If it is so important to him, he should find someone his own age and make that happen the normal way. It's not your responsibility to make your mom's boy toy feel like a man. You're closer to being his much older brother than his son. Weird. This, like of course he feels like a child in this relationship and family. He's not going to feel like a man of the house in this situation. He's very unlikely to get his own child. So why is he sticking around? Me and my siblings all think he has issues talking to girls his own age. And so it led to this. You were downplaying your mother's behavior as well. If you'd cringe at the idea of a 58-year-old man dating a 24-year-old woman, you should be as disgusted by this situation. First update a week later. Anyway, I told both my siblings and we agreed we'd collectively put our foot down with Phil at our next family dinner next week, especially after an incident where Phil referred to my brother as sport and asked if he wanted to go see a baseball game with him. Admittedly, I was a bit spurred on by what you all said and got involved, pinging him back with, "Oh, no tickets from me, Daddy?" My brother responded with, "Daddy wants me all to himself." Hot. Phil took a few minutes to respond before saying he was shocked, speechless, and disgusted. He then messaged me privately to say he was utterly appalled and that he'd never disrespect his own father the way you boys did. At this point, I kind of lost it and said, "Right, and that's because you're not my father, Phil. You're a 24-year-old man-child dating my mother. You have no right to my respect, especially not to the respect a father gets." I immediately apologized, but then blocked his number and left the group chat. Apparently, he sent a similar message to my brother who responded with more daddy jokes, and Phil ended up blocking him. Well, that aside, I don't think the family dinner is going ahead. After the original post blew up, it seems someone from his Lions Club found it and reported it to their chair or whatever. Phil has either been expelled or resigned, or is it in the process of one of the two? He has removed nearly all mentions of the Lions from his social media. His last post about it was a cryptic goodbye where he drones on about what it means to be a man in the modern day and the duty of fatherhood bestowed on all men at birth. Really weird stuff. My mom called me half in a panic and half in a rage about the stuff I'd been telling about him, before breaking down and saying we needed to meet. So we did, and I got my brother to come over too. I know Phil has temporarily moved back in with his parents in the next town over, but from my understanding, they still want to go ahead with the wedding, though I think that's mostly because they've already spent money on it. When she said she was determined to have more kids, plural, my brother stepped up and asked if she really thought that was a good idea at her age. I pointed out that assuming she had a baby next year and lived to 80, the kid still wouldn't have finished college by the time she passed. She stammered on about how people live longer these days before breaking down crying and admitting she's not ready to give up on mothering due to some deep-seated trauma and fears about the family breaking apart, which I won't go into for her sake. When we reassured her that we weren't going anywhere, she calmed down. We had a very good, honest conversation where she agreed to drop the IVF idea on the grounds that it'd be too expensive and unlikely to get greenlit. She's still adamant that it's scientifically possible and ethically acceptable, because she has to win that argument. But whatever. Instead, she's agreed to look into fostering. My brother and I highly doubt anything will ever come of that, so we're not worried anymore. The very good news is that she's also agreed to look into therapy/psychiatric help to deal with her trauma. We helped her get in touch with a nice lady in town so she can unpack all this in a healthier way. At least one person is getting the help they need. I have no idea what's happened with Phil or what's going to happen with him, but I made it clear to my mom that he is not my dad. He's not even my stepdad, and I'm not a kid. He's never going to be either one outside of legal technicalities. She relented pretty quickly. I think she's finally broken out of her shell at least, and we've agreed that if things go ahead, that's going to be a huge red line. I don't know if Phil will want to be friends with me after all this. Lol. Anyway, thanks for the help on the original post, y'all. Wait, so Phil ran home to his mommy and daddy? Great job, kiddos. Great update. Thank you. Is this a message from inside a sitcom somewhere? This cannot be real. You say that, but about 10 years ago, my mother-in-law was obsessed with adopting a little boy, 5 to 7 years old, if I recall correctly. She made it very clear that my, then mid-30s, husband would be just like a full brother to this child, and our daughter would have another uncle. Her harebrained idea was so completely absurd that I literally laughed out loud when she proclaimed her adoption plans to me. She incredulously asked, "What's so funny?" I said, for one, the fact that she would be in her very late 70s when that child became a legal adult. For two, our daughter would never call a child her age or younger uncle anything. Don't worry, my mother-in-law has since moved on from that to countless other ridiculous notions. Sigh. I love how Phil's craziness escalated the already crazy situation of a 58-year-old dating a 24-year-old. So much so that it's not even a part of the discussion anymore. What I'm not understanding is why nobody is focused on that. Like, this is not normal. Is Phil legally an adult? Yes. Should he be treated like a kid? No, because he's not close to being a kid anymore. But that still doesn't make this age gap okay. Like 24 and almost 60? If the genders were reversed, a lot of people would say this isn't right. And it's not right regardless of what gender Phil is. There is absolutely no way Opie's mom isn't taking advantage of Phil. Sorry, Opie, but this is just plain gross of her. Nobody with decency would date a 24-year-old when they're 2 years away from being 60. It's not fair to the younger partner. The older partner is likely going to die decades before them, and OP's mom is at an age where it would be plain selfish to have and raise a baby when there's a possibility she could die in the next decade. Let's be real, it's not uncommon for people to die in their 70s, or even in their 60s. Is 60 super old? No, but it's more than middle-aged, and at that age, you're literally a senior. OP's mom clearly has a lot of trauma causing her to act out. None of this is normal. And the fact that Phil is trying to parent a man an entire decade older than him is really freaking weird. It indicates that he has issues too. And obviously some deep insecurities about dating an older woman who has kids older than him. Second update. A bit of an update as I can't respond to everybody, but I think the marriage is off. Phil has gone AWOL again and had a huge argument with his family after they demanded he call off the wedding and date people his own age. This apparently made him snap. My mom and I have met his mom and older brother, who said Phil is very insecure about girls his own age and has never been able to talk to them, hence his preference. This deeply upset my mom, and after some begging from all of us, she has agreed to push the wedding back, though she still wants to keep dating him. I have no idea where Phil is, though his brother assumes he's couch surfing with his D&D friends. These friends have been sending me and my brothers some not so nice messages, because apparently we're just jealous of the MILF hunter. If any of you socially inept fools are reading this, I don't need to chase middle-aged folks, because I can talk to people my own age like a normal person. Peace. Last story. My 30 female husband 30 male acts like an old man. What are my options? Hi everyone, I need some advice. My husband and I have been together for 6 years, married for 3. And while I love him dearly, I'm starting to feel like I'm married to a 70-year-old man in a 30-year-old's body. He's got this boomer energy that is fully leaning into, and I don't know how to handle it. For example, he makes these painfully unfunny dad jokes to everyone, like telling the postman, "Hope there's no bills today, haha." The postman didn't even fake a laugh. He just stared at him. It's excruciating to witness, but my husband is so proud of himself for these little zingers. And then there's his bedtime schedule. If we're out past 9 p.m., he gets cranky and complains about how late it is. I'm 30, I still want to have fun sometimes. But nope, he's always asking if we can go home early because it's getting late or traffic will be bad tomorrow. I've tried telling him that it's only going to get harder to make and maintain friends as we get older, and that we should sacrifice staying out a little later if it means building social bonds and relationships. But he just brushes it off. I don't want to spend my whole life eating dinner at 5 p.m. and being in bed by 9. Is there a way to talk to him about this without making him feel bad or defensive? I love him and want to include him in things. Now for the advice. This whole situation can be avoided by you not seemingly relying on your husband to have fun. Go out with friends. Leave him at home in bed. Just don't do anything stupid when you're out. That's your option. OP, maybe he has trouble sleeping. Not enough sleep or has sleep apnea, so is tired early and trying to get more sleep. Very valid point. I acted like a cranky old lady at 19 because I was severely sleep deprived. Unfortunately, lost a lot of friendships before I got treated. I've got a CPAP now and it has genuinely changed my life. Married people don't have to do everything together. If you want to stay up later, stay up later. Don't want to have dinner at 5? Don't. Does he have to be up early for work or the gym before work? Is this a major personality shift? Because people aren't projects. It's not for him to change. It's for you to adapt. If you want to bring it up to him, make it less, "You have boomer energy and are boring and make bad jokes." And more, "Hey, I know you like to go to bed early, but can we stay up later on Friday and Saturday nights and make one of those nights a date night and the other one more social?" Partially agree, apart from the "it's not for him to change, it's for you to adapt." They're spending their life together. Both should make an effort to reach a middle ground. That goes for everything. You can't expect one person to always adapt themselves for the other one. That won't work. Update. My mom got a $30,000 personal loan in my name without my knowledge. The account is from February, which was when they bought a boat. Now, they've missed 4 payments and told me they're going to let it default since the boat can't be repossessed, and they're going to call DCFS on me. Original post. I knew my mom had her eye on a pontoon boat for the past year. She and my dad retired in 2022, and while they aren't swimming in money, they didn't seem to be struggling either, or so I thought. They bought a boat in February for a little over $30,000. I didn't think much of it, since they've always rented a pontoon boat 2 to 3 times a year and didn't appear to have money issues. At the start of July, I began preparing to buy a house. When I applied for a pre-approval, I found out my credit score was barely over 600, and I had an extra $30,000 plus in debt I had no idea about. Even worse, it was 90 plus days late. I told the lender the account wasn't mine, and he suggested my identity had probably been stolen, likely by someone close to me, since the money would have had to go to a bank account in my name. I shared a bank account with my ex-fiancé, so I asked the bank to look into it. They said the account had been closed a couple of years ago when we broke up, and no money had been sent to or taken from it since. I filed a dispute with the company and the credit agencies, assuming I had been hacked or that my identity had been stolen. About a week ago, I received a notice from the company at my apartment, the first I'd heard from them, saying they were going to charge off the account if payment wasn't made. I requested more information and was linked to their fraud department. They were able to tell me where the money was sent to a bank account from when I was a minor that I shared with my mom. When I called the bank, they confirmed there was recent activity on the account, and statements showed the loan coming in and almost all of the money being transferred into what looked like my mom's account at the same bank. I haven't used that bank in more than a decade. I called my mom and asked her about it, and after a long pause, she admitted that's how they bought the boat. They made one payment on the account and realized they probably couldn't afford the monthly payment for the next 5 years. When I asked why they hadn't told me, she said it was because they figured I'd say no, and they were right, and that they had worked hard in their lives and wanted to enjoy retirement. It ended with them saying the boat couldn't be repossessed because it was a personal loan. My mom suggested I declare bankruptcy, and I told them I was going to the police. My mom said no too, claiming they wouldn't take it seriously. When I insisted, she hinted she might have to call DCFS on me. My 2-year-old burned himself on a hot pan earlier this year. A simple ER visit where we were told accidents happen and is fine, over an unsafe home. I still think I'm going to the police because declaring bankruptcy would make it impossible for me to buy a house. I just needed to vent and get any advice. Now for the top comments before reading the update. She stole $30K, potentially ruined your financial future for 7 years, threatened to put your child in a situation where they could be taken and put in foster care for a freaking pontoon boat? OP, this right here. All this unnecessary suffering and stress over a pontoon boat? I'm sorry, but your mom sucks. Yep, this right here. It's all about enjoying their retirement. They're willing to hurt and abuse anyone who gets in the way of them having a nice retirement. Don't worry about the FCS. Chances are they will not investigate the report anyway. If they do, it's obnoxious, but these are 80% unfounded. You may need an attorney to represent you and file cease and desist letters that could turn into restraining orders. They stole $30,000 from you, and it was premeditated. They couldn't qualify for the loan themselves, so they stole the money from you instead, without asking. With a dollar amount, the DA is likely to press charges. I keep being shocked by parents who steal from their kids. This takes it to a fun new place with the threats of Child Protective Services. Please report this to the police. In addition, and tell them about the threats to contact Child Protection. For what it's worth, threats to file for grandparents' rights or to call CPS are a bright line for me. I would strongly recommend that you consider cutting contact with your parents or limiting their involvement with your family. They can't be trusted. Now for the update. I filed my police report the same day as my first post. The officer and I talked for about 20 minutes, and I provided a printed statement from the bank. A few days later, I spoke with a detective for another 20 minutes. Fast forward about 2.5 weeks, and my dad called to say my mom had been arrested. He said an officer and a detective showed up at their house asking to speak with her. When she went onto the porch, they grabbed her and arrested her. The detective, the same one I talked to, explained they had a warrant. My mom has never been in trouble with the law in her life, and she was arrested on a felony charge. They tried talking to her, but she immediately requested a lawyer. They stopped questioning her but didn't allow her to see a lawyer right away. My dad was furious, but the detective told him to have a lawyer go to the county jail in the morning before she went to see the judge. The next morning, her lawyer spoke with her and she was released in the afternoon with a new court date. About a week later, I received a call from DCFS requesting to meet with me about my son. I had nothing to hide, so I agreed. He spoke for about half an hour at my apartment and I explained the situation. The caseworker seemed understanding and said there were no obvious issues, but she had to follow up on the report. I will say that if I'm ever in trouble, I'm hiring a lawyer. The case was dismissed at her next court date in late September. The detective called me the next day and explained that the state attorney believed they wouldn't be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she intentionally stole my identity. He said he figured it was a flimsy reason because he had documents from the bank and loan company. He mentioned that the state attorney often drops cases, even clear-cut ones, especially when it's non-violent and they have a hired attorney. She never made a statement other than having her attorney tell the detective she didn't do it. The detective also said the loan company might go after my mom in a lawsuit. What brings me back here is that, a couple of weeks ago, the account was removed from my credit report. Even better, I got a letter from DCFS yesterday stating that the allegation against me was unfounded. I'm never talking to my piece of trash mom again. Thank you to everyone who gave me advice and hope in my first post. It just sucks that she'll probably end up with a free boat out of it, unless the loan company sues her, which I hope they do. Send the loan company the address where the boat is kept, with a photo. The problem is, they took out a personal loan, not a boat loan. In other words, they borrowed cash in her name, then bought the boat with cash, so the boat is not collateral for the loan. They might be able to sue the parents, but they'd have to basically prove in civil court what the state's attorney would not bother prosecuting, which would probably cost more than $30,000 in legal fees. Personally, if my parents called DCFS on me for revenge, that would be the end of my relationship with them, never to revive again. I would never let them see the grandchildren. OP, freeze your children's credit too. Have a lawyer send a cease and desist letter stating, since you took out a loan in my name and then called in DCFS, you are no longer able to contact me or my child. Attach a copy of the loan papers and DCFS report. If she tries after that, look into a restraining order. Next story. Update. Am I the a-hole for refusing to subsidize my wife and kids anymore? Original post. All three of them are adults with full-time jobs. None of them have contributed financially to our household budget. My wife went back to work full-time when our youngest was 7. He is currently 24, and our oldest is 27. The kids have no student debt. Our retirement property is overseas, and that's where I am currently. 2 months ago, I finally had enough. I came home from an out-of-town work trip, and none of the food I requested be in the house was there. And it wasn't anything extravagant, just a loaf of sourdough, some deli meat, cheese, and a few condiments. Enough so I could make a sandwich before going grocery shopping. Apparently, that was too difficult for 3 adults to manage. My wife and I had an argument about it, and the kids took her side. I reminded them they were supposed to be contributing to the budget, but all 3 of them started whining about how expensive life is. No kidding, I'm working to support all 4 of us. Whatever, I made plans to go to our property on my next rotation. So after my time off, I went back to work. When I flew home, I just stayed at the airport overnight and flew out the next morning. I also didn't deposit money into the budget account, so now they're paying for everything. The house, my truck, and my wife's car are all fully paid off. They're covering their own utilities, property taxes, food, and bills. And they're all furious that I'm not giving them money. I'm good here. When I go back to work, I'll do the same thing. Stay overnight at the hotel and fly to work. My company even flew me to a more convenient city to fly out from. I think 3 adults with full-time jobs and a free place to live should do fine. I probably missed a bunch of information, but I'm a bit drunk, so feel free to ask questions. If they're not stupid, I'll answer. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments before reading the update. No, not the a-hole. What's your next move? It already sounds like you're separated. Is that becoming permanent? I don't know how to assist you, but I wish you the best of luck. I'd be curious what exactly is expensive when they all work full-time and have no rent or car payments to make. If their electricity bills divided by 3 are so high it eclipses a rent payment, they should use less. If they spend their money on food deliveries and shopping, too bad, so sad. Not anymore. Not the a-hole, but you probably should have made your kids adults long before this. From what you wrote, they appear to live with you and don't have much going for them. Yep, sounds like some parenting failure. Kind of made the situation is now like you guys didn't leave me sandwich stuff. That's it. Good luck. Convo should have been had 10 years ago. Are you even sure they're paying for things like the property taxes and other bills? Are they under your name? Because you might want to switch it out so they don't let it just go into collection and you end up with a bill. I work with a guy who taught me a very important thing. There's a huge difference between a problem and my problem. Now for the update. I woke up and read so many more comments than I expected. Many of them made me think, I really don't love my wife anymore. I love my kids, but they are leeches. I will be contacting a lawyer and initiating a divorce. I also will be pulling the plug on my retirement plans with them. I have enough money to last me the rest of my life here. I also have a defined benefit pension, but it won't kick in for another 5 years. Part of the reason I was working so hard away from home was to provide for my family. But now I see they don't give a half damn about me. I'll be offering my wife the house in North America and my truck in return for a fast divorce. I think that's fair. I'll keep my home down here. The other option would be to liquidate and split everything, but she spent 30 years getting the house how she wants it, so I doubt she'll go for that. If she wants to keep the house, I guess that'll be up to her and the kids now. Thanks for helping me turn a drunken rant into a life decision. I was probably headed that way, but an outside perspective crystallized my thoughts. Next story. Am I the a-hole for not paying for my sister's college when I'm paying for my fiancé's? So I, 29 male, grew up dirt poor. Like sharing meals and lights off half the month poor. My parents did their best, but with 5 of us, money was always tight. I hustled like crazy after high school, went to community college, then transferred to a good university while working full-time. I graduated with loans but landed a solid job in tech. Fast forward a decade and now I've got a good income and no debt. My fiancé, 26 female, is finishing her degree. She's been working too, but with her schedule and the cost of school, I offered to pay for her last 2 semesters so she could focus and graduate without loans. I want us to start our marriage on solid ground, so I don't mind helping her out. Enter my younger sister, 21 female, who's still in college. She recently found out I'm paying for my fiancé's tuition and flipped, saying if I can afford that, I should help her too. She's always been bitter about me getting out and doing well while she and the rest of my family are still struggling. I get it, but here's the thing. I've worked hard to be where I am, and I feel like my fiancé and I are building a future together. My sister and I aren't close, and it feels like she's asking out of entitlement, not need. Now, my parents have chimed in, saying it's family first and I'm abandoning them. I don't think I owe anyone anything, especially since I've already helped out when I could, paid off their electric bill last winter, etc. I'm torn. I don't want to be a selfish jerk, but I also don't want to set a precedent of being the family ATM. Am I the a-hole? Your fiancé is your family. Remind your parents and sister of that. You think he is an ATM? Better not to give a single penny. Exactly. Once you start, they'll expect it every time. Better to set boundaries now than deal with guilt trips forever. Tell them, yes, family first. That is why I am prioritizing the family fiancé and I are building and the family we will be creating. Yes, family first means focusing on the family OP and his fiancé are building together. He's prioritizing a future they're creating, which is exactly what he should be doing. Not the a-hole. You don't have to take care of your adult sister. You're not her husband, nor her father. She is an adult and can handle her own things. I'd go low contact with the entire family if I were you. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my mom that my stepdad was cheating with our neighbor and ruining their marriage? So I, 19 female, found out my stepdad was cheating on my mom, and now my whole family thinks I'm the bad guy. Here's what happened. I was at a coffee shop the other day, just grabbing a latte and trying to chill. As I am sitting there, I see my stepdad walk in. Nothing weird at first, I just assumed he was getting coffee too. But then our next door neighbor walks in right behind him, and they sit down together. They were super close. And at first, I thought maybe it was just a friendly catch-up. But then they started holding hands across the table. And at one point, he leaned over and kissed her. Right there, in the middle of the cafe. I felt sick. My mom has been through so much, and I couldn't believe he'd do this to her. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, but I knew I had to let her know. So I snapped a couple of photos on my phone, just in case she needed proof, and later that night I showed her. She was devastated, obviously. I mean, who would it be? She ended up confronting him and things have been a mess since then. She's been talking about leaving him and they're arguing all the time. Now here's where it gets worse. Somehow everyone in my family found out what happened and they all think I made a huge mistake by telling her. My aunts and uncles are saying I shouldn't have gotten involved, that it was a grown-up issue, and that I basically ruined their marriage. They keep saying my mom and stepdad would have worked things out eventually and that I'm the reason they're falling apart. I'm honestly so confused and hurt by all this. I really thought I was doing the right thing by not letting my mom stay in the dark, but now everyone's making me feel like I made everything worse. So, am I the a-hole for telling my mom about the affair and ruining their marriage? Not the a-hole. He did wrong. You looked out for your mom, but you are being used as scapegoat. Thank you. He is a total a-hole. If you kept this secret for your stepdad, your mom would feel betrayed by you when it all came out later. Sooner or later, everything comes out. So, most of your family thinks cheating should be kept secret? What a family you have. Perhaps there is more cheating and everyone is afraid you will squeal on them too. I would ask them straight up if they think what he did was fine and if they think cheating is okay. Yeah, they're probably cheaters as well. Update 2. Am I the a-hole for going behind my wife's back and telling her pregnant sister that she's being cheated on? Link to the first part of this saga in the description. Now for the second update. Many people ask me for an update and I also need some outsider perspectives in my situation, so here it goes. Before I start, I want to clarify something for the people who kept calling me names for telling my sister-in-law the truth. Why do you think I should have minded my own business? She's family, and if family doesn't look out for each other, then who else will? Strangers? This isn't just some harmless or small lie for my brother-in-law. It's life-changing. My sister-in-law isn't just my sister-in-law. She's my friend. If I hadn't told her the truth, my POS brother-in-law would have just kept cheating, and I would have lost a friend if I had delayed any longer. Now for the update. My sister-in-law only stayed at my place for 2 days. After that, she called me and said she didn't want to trouble me anymore and was going to stay at a hotel. I tried to convince her not to waste her money unnecessarily, but she didn't listen and left anyway. And yes, I am divorcing my wife. After a week of no contact, she called me and said she wanted to reconcile. She told me she was angry that I didn't listen to her and went behind her back. She said she didn't want to break her sister's family and had planned to convince my brother-in-law to stop cheating. But she claimed I had messed everything up. She said she was coming back. I told her to come over because I wanted to talk to her in person. This isn't the kind of thing you discuss over the phone. When my wife arrived and started explaining herself, I told her I was filing for divorce. She was shocked and said we could make it work. I told her we couldn't. I said, I don't trust you after everything you said, and you left me with no contact. I was worried all day about where you were, if you were safe, etc., and now you suddenly show up? I can't make it work. She tried to convince me not to go through with a divorce, but I had already made up my mind. I told her that her sister had stayed at our place for 2 days, and she got angry, saying, fine, let's divorce, and left. I told my sister-in-law that I'm getting a divorce. She wasn't happy about it, but she didn't try to convince me one way or the other. I also told her she could stay with me instead of wasting money on a hotel. She said it was inappropriate, but I told her, either you waste your money and struggle or you can accept my help. So, my sister-in-law and I have been living together for the past couple of days. We've discussed our spouses and their behavior, and we're both pretty angry about everything. My sister-in-law is even angrier than I am. She ended up calling my wife, calling her names, and told me she's hell-bent on ruining my brother-in-law. She's divorcing him and plans to go nuclear. She wants as much money as possible in alimony and child support. She wants to drain him. My wife and I haven't spoken since she left, and we both know the divorce is happening. My sister-in-law, though still angry, has started to calm down because it's unhealthy for her and the baby. She's now focusing on her career and reading stories about single moms. She's preparing herself. So that's all for now. And to the weirdos out there, stay away. Neither my sister-in-law nor I have any romantic feelings for each other. I'm just helping her because she needed support, which is why she hesitated so much in accepting my help. Call me a moral police if you want, but I know I did the right thing, not just for my sister-in-law but for myself as well. Now I know exactly what kind of woman my wife is. Did your wife ever tell you where she went? I find it interesting that she has a place where she can just go for an extended period of time and nobody knows where she went to. She went to the guy who she was having an affair with. He did not want anything serious, hence why she came back. Smart to divorce this woman. I don't know, and I don't care. I had mixed feelings. I love my wife and tried to stop her from leaving. Tried to convince her, but she left anyway. Well, I was worried all day every day about my wife, wondering where she was, if she was safe, if she had eaten. She never contacted me after she left, and her family didn't know where she was either. But no matter how much I love her, it's better if I just divorce her. I've lost all trust in her, not just because she wanted to hide my brother-in-law's cheating, but also because she said she would expect me to forgive her if she cheated and that she would forgive me if I cheated. I don't want that. None of this. Besides, if a pregnant woman can put her emotions aside, think for herself and take steps to move forward, then I should do the same. I need to cut out the toxicity and restart my life instead of constantly worrying. In a way, she kind of inspired me. I'm so sorry you're having to go through this. Not the a-hole, but please get support from whoever you can and continue providing support to your sister-in-law. Wishing you the best going forward. Thanks. I got my parents' support, but they won't pick sides. After all, we both are their children and we are fighting, which is understandable. My mom calls me every day at least thrice to check up on me. Me and my sister-in-law support each other and talk a lot. I am in pain, but her pain is unimaginable. She's pregnant and found out her baby's father is a cheat. Also low on money and ashamed to seek help. Yes, she's no longer my sister-in-law, but my friend. I'll try my best to support her. Though she's so much in pain, she's thinking about herself and her child. Women are truly strong, especially when they are pregnant indeed. Next story. Am I the a-hole for considering ending my not terrible marriage because being a step-family just isn't working? My husband, 40 male, was a widower when we met. I, 36 female, was a single woman who had never been married before. My husband has a daughter, April 13, from his first wife. April was 5 when her mom died, 7 when my husband and I met, 8 when she and I met, and 11 when we got married. Things with April were okay before I got pregnant. And by okay, I mean we weren't very close. She didn't call me mom or say she loved me, but we got along well. And she said she had no issues with us getting married. She was even in the wedding as her dad's best person. All was good. Then I got pregnant with our son, who is now 4 months old, and everything changed. She was furious when she found out we were expecting. She told us she would not be okay with it, and asked her dad how he could do that to her and her mom. From that moment on, she became hostile toward me, very angry, and lashed out at me, my husband, and anyone who tried to say she was going to be a big sister or referred to our son as her little brother. We got her into therapy and even did family therapy. April refused to speak. We tried to find a therapist who would click with her, but she still wouldn't talk. Eventually, we found a therapist who got her to speak one time, but she only said she didn't want to work with us or make things better. She refused to say why or answer any questions the therapist asked. She didn't address it with her individual therapist either. They worked on other issues instead, but that hasn't been enough to help her come around. People said that once our son was born, once she saw him, she'd fall in love with him and go back to how she was before. That hasn't happened. She's aggressively against anything to do with him. She has never held him, and we don't have any family photos of the 4 of us together. It breaks my husband's heart. He has talked to her and disciplined her, but it hasn't made a difference. She screams that he's not her brother, and even refuses to call him her half-brother, saying he's not my sibling at all. I can't speak to her at all now. The nice relationship we had is gone, and that makes me sad too. The situation isn't working, and our home no longer feels like a home. It feels like a house on the verge of collapse. I'm not sure I want to stay married and continue trying to figure this out for another 5 years. I don't see any hope for it to get better, and even though my son will still have to be around, maybe having 50% of the time in a loving home would be better. I'd be happier, even though I love my husband. When I confided in a friend, she told me I can't give up this quickly and that I'm not giving it enough time to get better. Am I the a-hole? People said that once our son was born, once she looked at him, she'd fall in love and go back to how she'd been before. I just have to ask, who the hell were these delusional people? Look at him and fall in love. Really? That's something you say to a nervous, soon-to-be parent. These people couldn't have had any real experience with this kind of situation. It rarely happens that older siblings, especially those who are vehemently opposed to the baby and want nothing to do with them, suddenly flip a switch just because they see the new kid. They don't look at the baby and think, "Aw, how cute, I love them so much." They look at the baby and think, "This is the drooling, puking crap monster that's turning my world upside down." Not just that, but she won't be the only little queen bee anymore. My older sister threw me out of the window as a baby and tried to harm me all throughout my childhood. Be careful. No judgment, but I'd be concerned about your son being with her during your husband's custody time with him if you divorce. Just something to consider since she is part of the household. And honestly, it sounds as if you would be giving her what she wants, which I don't know if that's a good thing. Next story. Am I the a-hole for asking my husband to prioritize our family tradition over his new friendship? My husband, 35 male, and I, 32 female, have a small but meaningful tradition we started during the first year of our marriage. It's nothing major, but it's important to me. Every November, on the weekend before Thanksgiving, we take a day trip to a lakeside town about an hour away. We spend the day walking, talking, and picking out a new ornament for our Christmas tree, something meaningful to our year. It's just one day, but it's one of those things that makes the holiday season special for us. Recently, my husband became great friends with a guy from his gym. They hit it off quickly, and I think it's great because my husband doesn't make new friends easily. His friend seems like a genuinely nice person and shares a lot of my husband's interests, like hiking and gaming. I know it's refreshing for my husband to have someone he clicks with so well. Here's the issue. My husband's friend invited him on a weekend trip during the exact same weekend as our tradition. My husband seemed hesitant to bring it up at first, but eventually he asked if I'd be okay with rescheduling our tradition to another weekend so he could go with his friend. I was caught off guard and told him it kind of hurt my feelings that he'd even consider moving it. He told me it wasn't a big deal for us to just go another weekend, and it's right in the sense that it wouldn't really affect anything logistically. But this trip has always felt like our thing. It's not that I don't want him to have fun or make new friends, but I feel like he's minimizing something that's special to us, or at least special to me. When I told him that, he looked surprised and then frustrated, saying I was overreacting. He eventually agreed to keep the weekend for our tradition, but I could tell he was disappointed, and I feel guilty about that. Part of me wonders if I'm being stubborn about a little ritual that maybe only I care about as much as I do. So, am I the a-hole for asking him to prioritize our tradition over his new friend? Edit. I saw some people asking how long we've been married. We've been married for 6 years, and we've been doing this tradition since our first year together. Always on the same weekend. A lot of people have asked why this specific weekend matters so much to me. I think it's because we've kept this tradition on the same weekend for over 6 years, and for me, the timing feels like an integral part of the tradition itself. It's become a marker for the start of the holiday season in my mind, and changing it feels like it would lose some of the meaning behind it. Info. While I think it's super nice your husband made a friend, he's currently blinded by the honeymoon phase of friendship. Does he actually enjoy the trip, or is he doing it because you want to do it? He's kept the weekend open every year without me having to remind him, and we always have a great time. That said, he hasn't explicitly said how important it is to him or how much he enjoys it. I've expressed to him how much it means to me though, so I'm guessing it may feel more significant to me than it does to him. That's part of why I'm second-guessing myself. Maybe I've been assuming we were on the same page about it being our thing without ever checking in with him about how he feels. I don't see how changing the weekend you go will change the tradition though. To some people, changing weekends is fine. Others need to celebrate on certain days. My wife's father's side does Thanksgiving a week early every year so everyone can make time for their other family on Thanksgiving. I know others that get upset if you try to celebrate their birthday on the closest weekend rather than the actual date. Update after a few hours. I want to thank everyone who shared their opinions. After reading the comments and giving myself some time to reflect, I decided to talk to my husband again. I told him I felt bad about how things went earlier and that I didn't mean to make him feel like I'm keeping him on a leash. I also explained why our little tradition feels so special to me and how I've always seen that weekend as our weekend. He admitted that he hadn't realized how much it meant to me. He said he'd been excited about the trip with his friend because it was the first time in a long while that someone had reached out to him like that, and he didn't want to let that slip away. We both agreed that we could have handled the conversation better, and that neither of us wanted the other to feel like their feelings didn't matter. As mentioned earlier, we've decided to stick to our tradition this year as planned, and my husband is going to plan a weekend trip with his friend in January after the holidays are over. Last story. Am I the a-hole for not allowing my sister to have her birthday party in my house? My husband, 26 male, and I, 24 female, recently bought our first home, and we've worked incredibly hard to get here. We don't come from money, and everything we have, we've earned ourselves. We are very close to my side of the family and see them nearly every day. I've always kind of been the black sheep of the family because I'm the only one who has set boundaries. Anyway, a week after my husband and I moved in, my sister, 26 female, sent me an invitation to her birthday party, which she planned to hold at our new house. I want to note that she had briefly asked me about hosting the party here a few days earlier, and I told her I wasn't sure because we still had a lot of unpacking to do. Clearly, that wasn't a concern for her, as she went ahead and sent out the invitation days later, inviting extended family who live several hours away and would need to stay a night or two. Since we're still settling in, we don't have extra beds or much furniture yet. And my husband and I didn't feel ready to host what felt like a large gathering so soon, especially since we haven't even planned a housewarming party yet. Both of us work full-time and have limited time to unpack, so things are moving slowly. I told my sister that we'd be open to having a smaller, more intimate celebration, just immediate family and maybe one or two close friends. I also explained that this move has been a huge transition for me, and I'm still getting used to the new city and lifestyle. While I wanted to celebrate her, I didn't feel ready for a big party. After that, she stopped responding to me. The next day, I went to my parents' house during my lunch break and my dad came outside to tell me that they didn't want to see me. He said I was being selfish for turning down my sister's request and that I had hurt the whole family. Now my family refuses to speak to me until I apologize. And they've called me ungrateful and a narcissist. I don't know if I was in the wrong, if I made a big deal out of it, or if I unintentionally hurt my family. So, am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. No wonder you've had to set boundaries with your family. It's utterly ridiculous that they feel like she's entitled to your space like this. You'd best contact those extended family members before they make travel arrangements, because it doesn't sound like she's going to. Or at best, she'll tell them it's cancelled and it's all your fault, so you look terrible. The entire family seems like they're a-holes, to be honest. Who in their right mind demands someone's house for their own private celebration, then badmouth to everyone? What a nightmare. Not the a-hole. You never said yes. You said that you would have to think about it. Your sister is the one who jumped the gun and started planning and inviting people. I don't understand your dad's comments about you hurting the whole family. That makes no sense. Definitely don't apologize. You've done nothing wrong. Would not be surprised at all if the parents were the origin of, "Our place is too small for that. Why not at your sister's new place? You can have your big party over there." Update. Grown man ruining my son's life. Please help me ruin his. Original post. I'm living in hell right now and need ideas. My son just turned 18 and is disabled. He needs and takes multiple medications and requires support at school. He does well in some settings and is on track to graduate and pursue trade school with support, and we're so proud of him. He is extremely impressionable, a little socially awkward, and desperate for friends. For years we've struggled because he gives away his possessions, gets into bad situations, like someone offering to sell him rocks at a park, him thinking they're collectible gemstones, only to freak out when he realizes they're drugs, and is easily bullied. He will do anything to be liked, which breaks my heart. We're working on this in therapy and with trusted adults, but it's a slow process. Now onto the grown man. This guy is 28 years old. Let's call him Quentin. He's frequently homeless, often sleeping in a tent in parks. Occasionally, he gets a voucher from our city to stay in a motel. He has 2 pit bulls, neither spayed or neutered, which he leaves in a tent or motel room when he works his fast food job. I have compassion for his situation, but not when it involves my son. It started with Quentin asking my son to watch his dogs in the park while he worked. My son, thrilled to have a friend and eager to help, agreed. He loves animals, so would spend 8+ hours a day or night alone in a park watching these dogs. He began asking if he could take dog food, toys, and blankets from our house for Quentin's dogs. At first we said yes because I appreciated that he wanted to help the dogs. But when we said no, he started taking things anyway. Things escalated a few months ago when Quentin told my son that now that he is 18, he didn't have to stay with us and could stay with him instead. For weeks, my son was sleeping in a tent with Quentin and the dogs or roughing it in the park. Quentin gave him beer and weed. My son would watch the dogs for entire shifts while Quentin worked. Quentin even told him he'd help him get a tent and vouchers too. The police are sympathetic, especially because of my son's disabilities and medical issues, but he's 18. The school is supportive, but with graduation approaching, there's only so much they can do. And again, he's legally an adult. We never pursued medical conservatorship because things were going relatively well before now, and we don't take removing civil liberties lightly. In the past week, Quentin got another motel room and messaged my son to come stay with him. My son went. He sat in a room watching the dogs while Quentin worked, likely smoking and drinking when Quentin was home. My son responded to our texts, but insisted he's an adult and can go where he wants. During this time, he missed a week of medication, school, part of his part-time job, and an important medical appointment. Being Quentin's friend has taken priority. He feels good helping Quentin. It even said, "Quentin is like a brother to me. He's the best brother I've ever had." Quentin's own family has kicked him out. They are nearby but clearly done with him. No idea who watches the dogs when my son isn't available. Earlier this week, my son gave Quentin his bike, saying he needs it more than me. My son came home yesterday in a complete psychiatric crisis from being unmedicated and likely high and or drunk. His medical issues were also exacerbated. He was banging his head on a concrete floor, and when we called emergency services, he spit at the police, so they restrained him and put his spit hood on him. It was horrific and he was begging for help. We're unsure when he'll be stable enough to come home and may need a medical procedure. He was coherent today, crying and apologizing, but remains 100% certain Quentin is his friend. I feel terrible because at 18, it's normal for him to start building his own life and friendships. I look forward to that day. He does have other, more age-appropriate friends, but they have busier lives and responsibilities. They aren't available 24/7. Quentin is, and my son loves the feeling of being needed when his phone pings with a message from his friend. How can I make this man's life miserable, or at least make it too uncomfortable or risky for him to keep hanging with my son? Important note, I do not want to harm or stress the dogs. It's not their fault, and my son would never forgive me. Now for the top advice before reading the update. Intervene now, before Quentin gets your son on a path of using harder drugs. Because everything about this situation screams that's where the situation is headed. Intervention in a serious way should have been executed way before this. Even sending the boy to live with distant relatives and blocking Quentin's number on any phone. This is heartbreaking and no good can come of it. Sounds like you might need to pursue medical conservatorship, which I know you don't want to do, but it sounds like you definitely have grounds, and it's the lesser of two evils at this point. I don't see things ending up well without intervention. Thank you for this, and others who prompt me to reconsider conservatorship. I called a lawyer on Monday. I had already done research and collected that info, but had a lot of hope that once sheltered work started up and he had less free time, it might not be necessary. Pay someone to be your son's friend that's more of a caretaker? Honestly, this guy sounds at the very least like a scammer. Sometimes the only way people into deep in one scam is a second scam. It's sad, but there's literally a bot on r/scams for recovery scams. Basically, people promising to recover your loss for some fee. It's not great, but if you could afford someone to offer better friendship and then point out that his old friend is lame, it'll be like positive peer pressure. Maybe help the person could help them join appropriate opportunities for new friendship, then phase out. This is another great idea, and I appreciated the comments below it here in the thread. I have reached out to some young adults older than him that might serve as mentors or fitness coaches. Hang out with him, work out, play basketball. Build positive connections with people who don't wish him ill. Thank you for this. I have a few possibilities here in our area. Update. A few months ago, I came here asking for tips to help get a man named Quentin out of my son's life. I'm super grateful for all the ideas and the many kind words. As of today and for the last 3 months, my son is happy and healthy. We found a transitional living house for him with 5 other young men and 2 house managers and a dog. He's learning how to adult, cooking, cleaning, and preparing for a job. The program includes therapy, daily gym sessions, yoga, skateboarding. Truly a dream come true. The house is about 40 minutes away from where Quentin lives. My son now feels he has friends, a sense of purpose, and independence. He's busy and learning so much, and the program also includes job training. Before this happened, I followed as much of your advice as I could. I contacted the manager at Quentin's workplace and the motel he occasionally stays at. I told them Quentin was allowing a disabled teenager to stay with him and was giving him, and other teens, alcohol. The manager, a local small business owner, took my information seriously. I also went to the motel and pointed out the sign stating all guests must have ID, which my son does not. I reminded the manager of this policy and said I'd contact corporates if it wasn't being followed. I also started calling the non-emergency police line when Quentin was camping at a park after closing hours or leaving his dogs unsupervised during the day. The police would move him along. Someone gave me the brilliant advice to become Quentin's best friend and show up all the time. So I did. If Quentin wanted to see my son, he got to see me too. I showed up at the park, at his work, and near the motel. I even prepared flyers to distribute around the neighborhood, informing residents about the tent, the camping, and the unsupervised, unneutered pit bulls near the playground. Quentin became increasingly upset. He accused me of stalking him and said he was going to call the police. I politely encouraged him to do so, telling him I'd love to share more with the authorities about what he was doing with my son and other vulnerable young people. I told him, if you want to be in my son's life, I'll be in yours. It's up to you. I felt so bold after all your advice and encouragement. I was ready for the long haul. In the meantime, we found a lawyer and tapped into resources to find my son some job training, since he genuinely wants to feel grown up and helpful. Through a local agency, he worked for a few weeks at a drugstore, stocking, cleaning, and assisting customers. It kept him busy and gave him confidence, which slowly started pulling him away from Quentin. Eventually, Quentin either got sick of seeing me or became worried about losing his job. The motel he stayed at stopped letting him stay, forcing him to use another location much farther away. With a longer commute to work and more obstacles, he must have decided my son wasn't worth the trouble. He stopped contacting him altogether. Thank you so much for all your ideas. As his mom, I was so focused on fixing things from my son's perspective that I didn't know how to deal with Quentin effectively. Your advice was invaluable. A huge thank you from the mom of a happy, healthy, busy, and purposeful young adult son. Glad it worked out for you and your son. You did great and are a much better person than I am. I would not have handled it as well and would have done some bad things to keep him away. Great mother, and hope this progress continues for you and your son. Good for you. You made a difference where so many fail. My son needs the same program. Please share it with me so we can save him too. You remind me of my mom and the lengths she took to keep her kids happy and safe. She died 24 years ago now on September 29th, 2000. The trajectory of my life would have been vastly different if I had her in my life instead of her dying while I was young. I think anyone should be immensely proud to have you as their parent. Maybe Quentin would have ended up different if they had someone like you as their parents and role model, but who knows? This comment has me crying. So kind of you, and thank you for the comparison to your mom. I'm so glad you had her. Last story. Update. My husband and I took in my best friend and her 3 young children, and I'm regretting it. Original post. My 30 female best friend, 29 female, recently lost her husband, home, car, and all sources of income. Her husband suddenly passed away, and he was the only one working while she stayed at home with their 1-year-old twins and 4-year-old. They had nowhere to go, so we took them in until she can save up enough to get an apartment. There was no life insurance. My husband isn't happy that they are here. He has told me that he does not like my friend at all, claiming that she has taken me away from him and taken over his home. He is paranoid that she is stealing our things when we aren't home and wants to put locks in our bedroom and office doors, as well as install cameras in those rooms. Today, my friend went into our bedroom to smoke a cigarette in our patio and take a moment to herself away from her kids while we weren't home. She called me to let me know she was going out on a patio, but my husband started freaking out when I told him. Now, he says he feels like he needs to get an apartment because he doesn't feel safe and feels like he no longer has a space in our home where they don't have access. It breaks my heart that he hates my friend so much when she hasn't done anything wrong. She's just going through one of the toughest times in her life. But I don't know if I'm being too trusting of my friend and inconsiderate of his feelings, or if he's being too paranoid. Now for the top advice before reading the update. I think there needs to be discussion of a timeline for when she is leaving. He agreed to take her in the short term. At least that is the impression I got reading this. So he needs to chill a bit about them living in his pace. That being said, suddenly having another woman he doesn't like and 3 kids in the house is understandably not awesome. I think the solution is to set a timeline for when she is leaving. Help her find a place as her friend, but stick to the timeline. And set some boundaries about what areas of the house she and her kids have access to and which are off limits. Just because someone is staying at your house doesn't mean they get to treat it like it's their house. The husband is right for not wanting Opie's friend in their bedroom, bathroom, and office. If she can't show immediate respect for that, she needs to be kicked to the curb. I'm sure she'll feel much more confined and restricted at a shelter. Your friend is taking advantage of you and she needs to go. How is she contributing? Is she keeping the house clean? Is she cooking some meals? Paying for some groceries or chipping in for utilities? Understandable that her situation is sad, but this isn't your or your husband's responsibility. You did a nice thing and she's taking it for granted. I guarantee this is going to put a strain on your marriage. It sounds like it has already. It's not your responsibility to take care of somebody else's family. I would tell her she has a set amount of time and stick to that. It might hurt your friendship, but you need to decide what's more important. Friendship versus marriage. She is not taking us for granted at all. She keeps the house clean, cleans up after herself and her children, has assistance for groceries and diapers, waiting to get approved for other assistance. This is the only problem we've had with her in the months she's been here. Her situation is heartbreaking, especially for her 3 children. If it was just her, we would have said no. My husband and I were on the same page with letting her stay. We agreed to 8 months, but I do agree that we need to set a specific move-out date. Maybe I'm a mean friend, but I'd never allow a friend to stay with my husband, our kids, and I. There's a boundary that you don't cross. Why didn't she have any single friends to help her? Because every person she went to said no to helping them, just like everyone else on this Reddit post said they do. My husband and I could not in good conscience let our babies be homeless. Now 40 updates a month later. This update is a few weeks overdue, but a lot has happened. It's hard to fit every single detail of a situation into one post, especially while trying to respect my friend's privacy during such a rough time. However, I took a lot of your advice. I apologized to my husband and asked him what boundaries he needed and what changes were necessary for him to feel more comfortable. We had this conversation before my friend moved in, but things turned out so differently than expected. I realized I was putting my friend before my husband, and it was a harsh wake-up call. My husband wasn't thinking about leaving me, but he was definitely unhappy. I'm glad we had this talk because being on the same page has made us both a lot happier. We sat down and talked to my friend, and it went great. She apologized for going into our bedroom when we weren't home, admitted it was unacceptable, and promised it would never happen again. I told her the bedroom and study were off limits, no exceptions. I also made it clear that her children needed to keep their toys in the playroom we set up for them and not spread them all over the house. She completely agreed to all of this. We changed the locks on the bedroom and study doors, added cameras, and installed a safe for valuables. Most importantly, we told her she needed to find a job and arrange daycare for her children as soon as possible, with a hard deadline of April 1st. She took the whole conversation really well and admitted that she needed this push to move forward and build a life for herself and her kids. 5 days later, she got a job and found daycare for her children. The energy in the house has completely shifted. My husband and I are spending more time alone together in our home, and all of our boundaries have been respected. To everyone who said they'd never take in a friend and her 3 kids, that's exactly why she had nowhere else to go. Everyone else said no. It's been rough on all of us, but my husband and I are now confident in our decision to help her, especially now that we both feel heard and respected. My husband has also worked on his anger toward my friend and feels more at ease interacting with her and coexisting in the same space. It helps that he sees she's taking our rules and deadlines seriously and acting accordingly. Reddit obliterated me, and while I don't agree with kicking her out, I appreciate the brutal honesty that helped me realize I wasn't backing my husband the way I vowed to. When I was young, my parents took in my dad's coworker whose husband had left her. Initially, she could stay as long as she needed, but eventually they did the same thing and said they needed to see her working towards getting back to being independent. She was in the Air Force with my dad at a time, so she had good options. Still a lifelong friend. Love this successful story, even though it wasn't all great all the time. Makes me hopeful that our friendship will continue for another 10 years after this. Thank you for sharing. I think you handled this great, and wow, so wonderful you can help your friend and the 3 kids. It takes one person to make a difference in someone's life. If my extra room can make a huge impact on their lives, then absolutely let them use it. But boy, have boundaries and house rules made things so much tolerable, lol.